have it. Article 18, to see if the town will vote to establish a revolving fund pursuant to RSA 31:95-H for the purpose of ambulance services. All revenues received for ambulance services will be deposited into the fund, and the money in the fund shall be allowed to accumulate from year to year, and shall not be considered part of the town's general fund unreserved fund balance. The town treasurer shall have custody of all monies in the fund, and shall pay out the same only upon order of the town administrator. No further approval is required by the legislative body to expend. Such funds may be expended only for the purpose for which the fund was created. An explanation. This would allow the fund to be created. Each year, all the revenue collected from ambulance fees are deposited into the fund, and operating expenses for the ambulance services are paid out of the fund. Both the revenue and the operating costs of the service would not be included in the tax rate. Also, no money may be spent from this fund for any item or service for which an appropriation has been specifically rejected by the voters during the same year. Motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion on Article 18.
With the yield of the fire chief.
Mike Williams, 14 Laurel Road, Fire Chief. I guess just to sum it up, basically what it would do, it would allow me to reduce the ambulance portion of my operating budget next year, to obviously lower my operating budget. All the revenues collected would go into this fund to actually operate the service that they provided them.
Anybody have any questions for Chief?
I guess the only question I would have is the monies are offsetting it, and the ambulance service operates at some point in the net loss. Who covers that expense? Is it your budget again covering it? It doesn't make it from it.
It would all, it would come back to the operating budget, but I don't ever anticipate that happening.
Tommy, I'm 43 Joanne Drive. I'm a little confused. We've already voted on the town budget. And what I see here is now the ambulance is already built into the town budget, is it not?
Correct.
So we're not asking to take any money out of the general budget, but we're asked to take revenue that could be coming in, which we don't even know how much that is. Maybe first you could tell us how much revenue have you received at this point for a 6-month period, and what do you project for next year?
Currently, the ambulance fund in this current fiscal year, which was July 1st of 2010 till today, is received roughly around $140,000, $150,000, Christine. So it's roughly a net of which we've collected so far. And obviously that was on about 650 transports. That was from July, not even a year, July 1st till now, so that's 8, 7, 8, 9 months. July 1st of 2010 till today, which was April 1st, so it was 9 months.
All right, so we're talking about $250,000 that if this goes through, we over budget.
Yeah, it could be up to 250,000. It's 150 right now, so I guess anticipating April, May, and June, yeah.
All right, so if the ambulance service brought in $500,000, all of that money would go into the ambulance fund, and none of it would go into the general budget fund, and either be returned at the end of the year to offset taxes.
Correct. I mean, this fund would be established for current capital expenditures and future capital expenditures. So it's not just for the year-to-year operations. I mean, obviously, the service was set up with impact fees. In the future, there's going to be some capital expenditures that will be needed to be made, so that would actually come out of this fund. So I guess we would be back here looking for money to replace vehicles in future years. So every operating expense would come out of that in the future.
Mark Eagle, Main Street again. If I could just get a little more clarification on it then. We've already, the citizens, or we are appropriating money into your budget right now for ambulance. And now should this warrant article be passed, any additional money from their revenue will be going into your budget, in addition to your already operating budget?
I believe, if I could just, for Christine, I think we have to have a fund has to be established, and then that money, from that point on, revenues would go into the account, so it wouldn't be the current revenues already collected, it would have to be from July 1st on those revenues.
Right, if the voters were to approve this article, it would be the money that is earned after July 1st would go into this fund. And you're correct in saying that we have $79,000 worth of expenses in the operating budget to run the ambulance service. So for the first year, there'll be a point in time when council will have to make a decision that they are going to now shift the costs out of the operating budget and into this fund.
So what we're saying here, should this article pass, there is an additional $79,000 appropriated for the ambulance funds in their budget,
In their budget, yep.
in addition to what the revenues will already be generated from this article.
And at some point in time during next fiscal year, council will have to make the determination of stop hitting the operating budget and start hitting this fund.
So it's very similar somewhat to that DPW warrant article that was just recently rescinded, same idea.
No, that article, you would have to go back to the taxpayers to take money out of that article. This is not going back.
So I guess my concern for us on the citizens is that I guess we would need assurances, and I trust Chief Williams to save that money that's currently being appropriated because we just voted on it, or at least in May we'll be voting on it, that somehow that $79,000 will somehow at one point at the end of the next fiscal year in June be returned back to the general fund.
I think you're correct Mike, by saying that, because next year, obviously my budget, my operating budget would be reduced by that as well, correct?
So I do want to point out that this type of fund is being funded from revenue, which is very similar to the fund that the transfer station is going to be using for the 700,000 of the 920,000 that is needed for the automated recycling. So this is revenue coming in from calls, which may be for our citizens or for citizens of our surrounding community. So this is not all taxpayer dollar, even when it's coming from Hooksett residents who are using the service. There are outside of Hooksett residents who we would also be collecting this revenue from. Thank you.
Sorry. Pam Auger, 24 Casey Drive. Just to make a point, it's not within the chief's authority to return that money to the taxpayers. That's the authority of the council. So if you appropriate $79,000 and they don't need to spend it on you, they can just spend it on anything they want.
I'd like to make where this considerably could be a lot of money. And I'd like to make an amendment in the wording that it would require the administrator to get council approval to expend these funds.
Administrator, you want to add after the word town administrator and council, or council? What are you saying?
And right down.
No, it's not, no, legislative body is here. You don't want that.
No, and the town council is what you're saying, right? The town.
Be clear on what, you gotta be clear on what you want.
Right. I'm
You have to
writing it
be
down.
clear on what you wanted to say.
Would you like me to read it, George?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, I'll be seconding it, Marlene, so I'm just going to read it for George. To see if the town will vote to establish a revolving fund pursuant to RSA 31:95H for the purpose of the ambulance service. All revenues received for the ambulance service will be deposited into the fund, and the money in the fund shall be allowed to accumulate from year to year, and shall not be considered part of the town's general fund unreserved fund balance. The town treasurer shall have custody of all monies in the fund and shall pay out the same only upon order of the town administrator and the town council. No further approval is required by the legislative body to expend. Such funds may be expended only for the purpose for which the fund was created.
Do I have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the amendment, I'm not sure, I need to check with council. Huh? One second. I need to check with council to find out whether or not the language of this article is prescribed by statute. And if it is, we can't amend it.
No. Stephen Bucky, Town Council. The language of the article is not prescribed by statute. And the statute does say that the designated parties who are to authorize expenditures have to be established in the language of the article, which is my understanding what Mr. Longfellow is proposing, adding another designated party to give approval. So it would be a permissible amendment.
Okay. Chief?
I guess the only question I would have is, the only question I would have is, being in the operating budget, obviously, there's, right now in the ambulances and stuff in there for maintenance and everything else. Every expense would go to every time I pay a bill for a set of tires for an ambulance, would go to the council. I guess I'm just a little confused.
You'd have to ask them as to what their intent is. They're the ones who propose the amendment. What's the intent? You want the council, you want them to come, you want them to come for every expense for the ambulance
I
service?
don't know, I'm not worried about taking the money out for normal repairs and stuff like that, equipment. But it could considerably be built up to where the council might want to take the money out and dump it in the general fund. They'd have to go to the administrator the way it's worded.
It can't be used for that purpose.
Maybe just a recommendation, maybe you could say capital expenditures, because those are obviously larger expenditures that the council approves right now. I mean that, because obviously there would be in the future years capital expenditures coming from the fund.
I think that changes the intent of the article.
Yeah, I think one of the, we were just discussing, one of the issues, the way it's worded, would be for coming out of operating. Now it just wouldn't, you would have to get town council approval for all those items as well. Right now, it's part of administration. Town administrator approves it, it gets processed. So it would have to go forth, maybe it would delay some payments on such, because you would have to bring anything that would fall under that category to have the town council approve it also.
My name's John Turbine, Brown Road. What happens if we lose money on the ambulance service? I'm not entirely sure how we got into the ambulance service business in the first place, but I mean, if all revenues and all expenses are going into this fund and you don't collect enough revenues to cover your expenses, which happens, who funds them? And what's the advantage of having a separate fund to begin with? I mean, you got waters, the village, and the other, and you've got sewer, which are separate municipal organizations, but is this going to be structured as some kind of a separate organization for budget committee review? Question.
I think the intent of the article was to take your revenues collected, obviously, set up the fund for not only the operating costs, so it would reduce the my operating budget, obviously, which would obviously reduce taxes. It would, all that operating costs would be removed out of the operating budget and basically have a self-funding system. So revenues collected would go into that fund. Just to answer your question, I think that would come back out of an operating budget if there wasn't enough revenues coming in to offset the expenses.
Looking at the bottom line, revenue offsets taxes. I mean, what does the Department of Revenue Administration do? They take a look at the revenues, they take a look at the expenses, and they set the tax rate. So I don't see any particular advantage. to having a separate fund. Obviously, the council voted for this. What advantages did you guys see in setting this up?
I'll speak if no one else wants to. I think a part of it was, again, comparing it to what we have seen the Public Works Department do with their capital reserve from revenue. And that is to cut the amount of money we need to raise from taxation in order to replace and maintain our fleets that we have now. So that's my answer.
Yes, Mike?
Morning, Harold Murray, 311 Hackett Hill Road. Right now, the town administrator has a maximum that she can expend without going to the council. She has imposed upon all the department heads a maximum that they can spend without going to her. I can see no reason why that couldn't just fall through when you, if this is established the same way. And that would take care of the flat tires and the gasoline, and it would satisfy your requirement that he's not gonna go out and buy a Cadillac